Welcome, Melissa. Come on down. My mic wasn't hot yet, but hi, Melissa. How are you? Okay, we ready to go? Do you guys got me hot over here? Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. How's the event show going? And are there any of those cool bamboo things left for good luck from Foods Catering? That I see. Are there more? He's like, yes. So excited to be back together as an industry, and it's going to be a fun couple days. I'm Lynn Edwards. I'm the founder of Proper Planning. We're a full-service event planning company based here in Seattle and producing events worldwide. And Stuart asked me to partner this year on the event show and come up with some great content. And one of the things I said to him, first and foremost, is let's get our planners elevating their thought process and being right there in the C-suite and making sure that we have a voice at the table, whether it's a board table, a planning table, but really that we're elevating our thought process. We know as planners we have a lot of tools in our toolbox that we have to use to be able to run different C chairs, but one of them today we're going to talk about is marketing. And I think it's really important because I cannot tell you in 30 years in the business how many people I've asked who should be coming to this event, and you just get this glossed over look. Who is this event for? Who's not coming? Why aren't they coming? What do we need to do with our product to attract more people? All these marketing 101 questions that seem to stump some of the event owners that are out there. So super critical, and I have amazing panelists for us today. We've got Nick Borelli in from Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm not originally from there, so don't expect an awesome accent. When I hear it, I'm like super excited every time I go to a restaurant and the server, I'm like,
Just make it up.
He's
Hey,
loving the sunshine. I said, it's like this all the time here.
yeah,
I
it's
just don't
warm.
tell anybody. And then I have Marcus with us, Marcus White with MCW Events. Both of these gentlemen wear their marketing hats on a regular basis, and so I'm really excited to have an interactive discussion. So we're going to go through some initial questions, and then there's a mic in the back, or you can also just yell it out, and I'll repeat it here from the stage. But bring your marketing questions, because we're ready for you. Okay. Everybody, you got something to drink? Nick thought we should have Red Bulls up here, and I quickly vetoed that.
Someone needs to make that like a thing that we do for speakers is just put the Red Bull under there. I mean, like we're trying to give you the energy, like let's force that into people.
How about Red Bulls for the audience? Okay, so you guys ready to have some fun this afternoon? All right. Here's my first question. Do you guys think that event professionals see themselves as a chief marketing officer?
If I said yes, then we'd be done.
Yeah.
So
Session over. Red Bulls in the lobby.
Yeah, so I would say no. I think that here's the fundamental difference as I see it. CMOs, very much like me. So I'm gonna make you all wince all at once. I'm not a type A person, and I'm not big on details.
There's the door.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like fire in your eyes, right? You're like,
Or not our tribe. We're
Yeah, so like for me, like all of my friends are, everyone I work with in events, they are. I'm not that. Like I work on event strategy, and in event strategy, it's broad strokes. It's those questions that that Lynn said, and it's big picture, and that's not the life of most planners, right? Like you're in the trenches.
You're in the trenches.
Yeah.
How many of you work directly for a CMO?
Ooh, so we've got newbies. We're turning them into CMOs today.
Yeah, totally. I like to say that I'm CMO adjacent because most of my clients, I work in high tech, shocker, here in Seattle, but I do a lot in San Francisco, New York, Boston, Los Angeles, and most of my clients are CMOs. And so I happen to have I was asked to do this panel like 3 days ago to fill in. Someone got sick. And I already had a meeting with the CMO of Tableau Software, Elisa Fink, scheduled yesterday. We became really good friends. I worked with her for like 10 years. And I don't think that planners think like CMOs because I think as planners, so many of the times we are the ones tasked with implementing the event. But what would be so helpful, I think, as planners, if we really understood the why behind the event. Why are you having this event? What is the business case for having this event? And what do we as the company want to get out of it? And if that filters all the way down to the logistics person, then we really have a fundamental understanding for how and why we're making those decisions, because it's supporting the business. And that was the one thing that I had said yesterday to her, and she was like, yes, that is exactly what it is that a CMO is thinking about, is how is this particular event or this digital event or this insert here, how is it supporting the business and what is it doing to support the business? And if we can all answer that question as the logistics leads and the planners, it really gives us a different lens into how we would do things, right? Because it has a direct impact on decisions that we would make, right? So if it's a sales kickoff or something like that that a CMO might not normally be invested in, or it's a prospecting event, we would make very different choices for the decor or the messaging that we're going to have. But some of those things, as we're starting to do these and be the doers and the hows of this, I think is really where it changes and it shifts that perspective that we all have as planners to help us make more informed decisions. But then we're right there sort of answering that question along with the CMO, and we're also aligned, which is the other thing that I think is a really big deal.
And I think there's a lot of planners from, Jeff Bow, come on down. It's so fun to embarrass all my friends. But I think that one of the things, some of these people may work for different organizations where the event is their product. The reason that we started the business track was to get people thinking of every event is its own business. It's a standalone business that you've got to create a need for, an event strategy, which I'll have Nick go into in a little bit, an event ID. What is our marketing? What's our reach? What's our channels we can use? You really are, even though you're the event planner, you are put in a role where you're having to make all the marketing decisions about this particular event. So our hope is that people can be okay with owning a chief marketing officer hat and thinking at it from a level of a marketing executive. So Nick, when you talk event strategy, what are some of the processes that you use to kind of, in a first meeting with a client, what are you trying to dig into? What questions are you looking to have answered to build a strategy around?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you have to start with is, it's translation of the words that we use in the events world and the CMO might use. So an example would be this. You have the idea of, if I tell everyone here, what's your event's theme? You're like, let's talk about this. This is fun. I can get into this. Like I know what that means. It's visceral. I can touch it. If I'm telling to a CMO, I'm like, okay, talk to me about what your organizing principle is for this event, this gathering. What are we doing from a strategic point of view? What are we trying to accomplish? And with that organizing principle, it answers the question why we're having this event. And it's a given frequently. We're having this event. I worked on the Toronto Board of Trade's 126th annual dinner, and I was like, "So why are we having this event?" And they're like, "Because it's another year, and it's 126. We had 125 last year. That's why we're having this event." And I'm like,
Do it.
I don't think your event needs to happen. It's your job to prove me it does." And they didn't like that, as bureaucrats go from a different country too. But so that was my question: was prove to me that your community needs this event. Like, why does it need it now? What does it need? What will make a difference? Like, what is missing that only you can fulfill with your mission, vision, and values? That's your organizing principle, is why we're coming together. And it's really valuable for a CMO who just wants to know that, right? Like, they want to know, okay, we're doing a user conference. Why? And if you have an organizing principle, it becomes the boss. Like, you get to say, well, we make decisions, we can either go left or right here. Well, the organizing principle is this, which one does it fulfill if we go this way or that way? Those kinds of questions, which I find really difficult to get into. A lot of my friends who are like, on the planners, like they're planning, they're like, oh, I know, the event's happening, we're doing it.
Are the linens green or blue?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, but it's also like, it's a foregone conclusion. Like, it seems like extra steps. It isn't. It's actually
fundamental.
super important.
Yeah.
And strategy is its own stage before planning. And it creates alignment that makes things easier. So when you ask for more resources, and everyone here's like, I'm not going to get more resources, you could. Like, the thing that I'm very, very passionate about is if you learn all of these things, if you can translate what you're doing into CMO language, if you can prove on the way that they score things that this actually accomplishes that, you can ask for more resources. Like, we don't have to be the number 3 most stressful job. The other two do.
We don't?
The other two do. It's not a badge of honor. Like it's something to get off of, right? Like with the military, police, like they have guns. Like they're going to be on that list forever. We could get off of it if we get more resources, if we think more holistically, if we like, everyone I know is like when those things come out, they're like, yeah, I told you, and I'm like, it's not really good. Like I understand that like it's validation for like what you do is hard. That's fine, but if you had more resources and you got to do cooler things and you had less stress because you made more money, you probably would be cool with getting off that list, right? So like,
Yeah, totally. And I would also say that for those that, own your own companies like I do, and so many of us that do own their own companies, it's effing hard. Like it's really, really hard. But the thing is, it's like deep down, what your value proposition is, right? Like, inherently what it is that you want to say to the world, how you want to say it to the world. And that goes right into that chief marketing officer, which is telling the story, right? Like you are all storytellers. We are all storytellers in this room. And so leaning into that and owning that what story is that you want to tell, or if you have your own event, like you were saying, like so many of you in here might own this event here. Like, why is this important for people to come to? Tell that story, yell that story, do it digitally, do it in person, like as we start to come back to this. But inherently, I think that we all know and we all have to wear these hats, like I'm an accountant on some level sometimes, I'm a bookkeeper sometimes, I'm a CEO sometimes, and I'm a CMO sometimes, but so much of it for me is like how we tell that story to our clients, how we tell that story to the attendees of the events that we own, or how we tell that story in general to the attendees of the clients that we're servicing too.
How many people here have taken a marketing class? Ooh, that's good. That's sexy. All right. So I have a great marketing story. When you talk about marketing, I was told early on that marketing is creating an interest, sales is asking for the business. I'm like, okay, that's a good distinguish, because you see a lot of people, I'm the director of sales and marketing. You're like, wow, those are two distinctly different things. But then I taught a high school class on marketing, and we were talking about it, and I said, okay, we're going to come up with a company. What do you want? They said, oh, a nightclub. Perfect. All right, let's talk about your target audience. Buzzy word, but let's get into it. Who do you want at this nightclub? And I had a flip chart in front. And they're like, well, we only want cool people there. Okay, great. So I drew a big circle and I put cool on the inside and I put not cool on the outside of that circle, right? And I go, who else? Tell me a little bit more about who this is for. Well, we want people who stay up late. Great. Anybody who goes to bed at before 9, you're out of our circle, right? And I start drawing this target, and these light bulbs are going on for them, and I'm like, keep going. Who else? Oh, they need to love music. I'm like, perfect. We are getting into the center of this target. Love it. People who stay up late, who love music, that are cool. Perfect. Now we know who our persona, right? But to watch these high school kids get it and the light bulb, and then to say, how should we promote our nightclub? And they're like, billboards. Literally like, how many uncool people that go to sleep early are going to look at your billboard? And then they got into this whole thing about how they were going to create this really cool custom playlist and distribute it only at night. And I was like, yes to all of it. You are now officially marketers. But I share that story because it is so basic, and yet I've asked questions. We do an affordable housing conference, and I kind of laid out everybody who comes to that, and I said, where are the architects? And the client just looked at each other. I'm like, I mean, I don't know, call me silly, but they seem like the cool people that they should probably be in the room talking about building affordable housing, since they're the builders. And they were like, oh. So, and there was a lot of examples and events that we've done where you find that there's an audience that's completely missing because they haven't taken the time to think through who wins if affordable housing wins. Banks, architects, you name it. Like they didn't do that exercise to really identify who their customers were and who their ancillary customers were, right? Not the direct, obvious lawyers should be here at the Bar Association, but who are those second, third tier people that are kind of cool, that like music, that stay up late?
No, you make a great point too, because I think that so many times we're talking to different audiences at things. This is a great example of there is such a, it's kind of like a family reunion here, like we know so many people in the room, but we all do different aspects of these events. And so making sure that we're speaking to not everybody all at the same time, because it's absolutely impossible to make every single person happy. That makes it easier for me because I'm not going to make every single person happy, but I'm going to try That's not part of it. But being able to understand who is there, that you have, introverted people there, you have extroverted people there, you have salespeople there, you have customer success people there. Like they're all very, very different. Like not a lot of people are comfortable getting up on a stage and talking, right? But those people, you need to hear from them as well, right? So like, how do you create environments? How do you create the pull to bring people to your events and speak to them in different places? One of the tiny story that I had here was that when we did an event digitally, what was really interesting with this client was that we thought that 80% of the people would come to the .com, marcuswhite.com, to watch the content. What happened was that we found that 15% went to the .com, 50% went to LinkedIn, and the rest of them were Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth. Those are very different ways to consume content. Very, very different ways. The people going to the .com are absorbing it and eating it. Instagram, bloop, 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 and then LinkedIn, it's job related. It's how am I going to how is this event going to make my job better? And so when we started to tweak all of the content for exactly what you're saying, and you're saying is that we're speaking to these people in these different ways, LinkedIn became 15 minutes. .com became the big kahuna, 45 minutes. So we switched the content around so that we could really speak to those people in those chunks that they needed to be spoken to. And that was a really fascinating thing about,
we underserve a lot of people if you're not paying attention.
Totally.
Well, and we had a group that we did an analysis of the attendees, and we had like 80% in the maintenance field at this one particular show. We had zero content for maintenance people. And I'm like, how and why are they coming? We've not built anything for them. And yet, but I'm like, but yet here's an opportunity. I do have a fun question to share that you guys can offer your perspective on. Do a lot of event clients have a build it and they will come mentality? And when you have that, how do you tell them we've got to have a marketing strategy? We've got to have a marketing plan, dates. We got to be marketers here.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there is a lot of that, and I think that they think that their idea is unique, and frequently it isn't.
Nick's the truth
I mean,
teller.
I've been a consultant
Just
for a
so
long
you
time,
know,
so like
you're not
I'm just
that
the
unique.
cold water that you throw in people's faces. I'm like, this isn't.
You're the dream killer.
Yeah, totally. You're
sorry.
like, oh, I see what you're saying. Like, I've been to that.
And Marcus and I are just going to keep creating a cool event. And
Yeah,
people will
exactly.
come.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, it takes a village for these things to succeed. And it's not just because you have this like great idea you have. Like, there's a lot of great ideas that just die. What's really required for you is taking a holistic approach and taking an approach that has designing with diversity and having multiple points of view. The likelihood of your success exponentially increases when you have the more variety of people weighing in on the design. Like for instance, like if I'm putting something out there, and I use my bias. A good example is this. So like I actually just told this story. So sessions where someone comes up on the stage and says, okay, everybody, to start the session off, I want to get everyone here to stand up and shake around and talk to the person next to you or whatever. So I'm a really jaded person who's been to a million events, and I hate that stuff. But, so I looked at the data on it because I work with this company that actually looks at data of sentiment analysis of people in sessions. People, in general, actually respond really well to that. I'm an outlier, but if I design things like as someone who's been to too many events and is like, oh, really, an icebreaker, I really need that, like I would say that like if I designed that exclusively, I would be only working for people like myself, and I miss so much opportunity, right? So looking at some cold data out there to like help you make those decisions is a big deal. But like for the most part, like if you build it, it will be applicable for you. If you work with other people and you bring partners in different perspectives, and hopefully some people who are not just like telling you like, yeah, every idea you have is great, you're a genius. Like get those people that are like the absolute good friends that will tell you like, no. And those people are super valuable. So I would say like surround yourself with some dissent, so get some devil's advocates, and then design things like that. If you do that, it will go through some systems. and then all of a sudden you'll have something that is not just designed from like, yeah, of course, this is a great idea, I'm just going to see it through. Like, make it go through the ringer before you actually put it out there.
It's so funny. I'm thinking about this. What Nick was telling me what he does, and I remember in the events business when social media came on board. It's like, oh no, people are going to be able to tell us if the red line is long or the toilet's overflowing. Oh no, and then everyone's like, embrace it. But then Nick tells me he works on facial recognition. He could tell me if my attendees are smiling and happy. I'm like, what? That
Yeah,
AI
I mean,
stuff's a little scary,
you
but
gotta-
also kind of cool if you embrace it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want to know the truth because, it's tough, right? So if you've got some thick skin, you'll go pretty far. But yeah, you can't just like put out an idea and hope for it to succeed. And you have to have like a whole group of people who buy into it and like will be made whole through your event existing. Like it has to satisfy from the very origins of it a number of people succeeding, unless you're self-financed and everything you're doing is just to like make you feel good. But if there's other, people that are stakeholders in it and like they have something to win on it, then you need to bring them in as early as possible, as the genesis of the idea. You need to bring the people that you would identify as your major sponsors and be like, how does this design make you whole? Like this, how does this position you as a leader, position you to create your goals? What we do frequently, because we're asked as planners, I'm using the we, loosely, but planners are generally asked to do everything. And you start to do everything all the time. You start to think for everybody all the time, and you don't actually ask other people to be part of it because so much is asked of you. I mean, the amount of absurdly, what's the Pantone color of the year? Are Chivari's in right now? What's the good chicken dish? What do you think about active shooters? Are you good with viruses? Why would you know all these things?
Because we're event profs.
Because we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So because of that mentality, because you're asked to know everything, you just start doing things as if you know everything. Take in other people, like take in those people, and don't just use them as vendors, but use them as specialist experts at the design phase. That's the big deal.
Totally. And think about also all of the stuff that happens in the hallway, right? Like we've talked about this countless times. And if it's your first time hearing it, like for me, the magic happens right after this session out there. What you all are going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And for so many people, it's group therapy. That's what we're here for, right? Especially event planners right now, right? Like we all need it. But for any event that people are doing, there is that other side of it too that you can pull into that marketing. Like, why are people going to this? And who do they want to talk to amongst each other? It could be marketing where I want to sell this to that person or whatever, but there is also that other part of like, how do I build my resume? How am I going to be smarter after I leave this? How am I going to make more money after I leave this? We're American. That's what we do. It's what we think about. It's my nightmare sometimes, but it's totally what we do. And it's the magic that happens in that hallway stuff that I also think as you're building something, you have to do. And I think that that's one of the things we learned in the pandemic was that, everyone kind of always poo-pooed an exhibit hall, right? It was like, the exhibit hall, it's so expensive, it's so this and that. But what we found was that the serendipitous conversations, if I'm standing in a booth and Nick is standing in a booth, there is a very good chance that Nick and I have something in common because we're standing in that booth. That did not happen digitally.
Ever.
It did not happen. It was impossible, and it was the one thing that everybody kept asking. Networking. How do I network? How do I get people to network? Can you network? Can I network?
Not as good.
It sucked.
Yeah,
It totally sucked.
When you're in person, your natural inclination is to build a bridge.
Yeah.
And like if you see the good example of this is the discourse that happens at live events versus the discourse that happens on social media, where it's talking point rhetoric versus talking point rhetoric, just loudness, where in real life you find that like you connect with, you're searching immediately for some kind of connection.
Yeah.
And once you have that, it's instant trust acceleration.
Yes.
And like that's what everything's built on. Like we talk about what is networking? It's just trust building. Like what is marketing? It's just trust building. All of it really hinges on trust. So if you can facilitate expedient trust, you can get the CMO to listen to like why you're doing what you're doing. is because like why would I just pay more money for PPC? I can target people better. It's more efficient. It goes on a spreadsheet really nice. And it's like, yeah, it's really slow to gain trust in that medium, where the accelerated trust that happens and the bonds that are built in real life are invaluable. And like you would spend this much money in that arena, which you can graph and you're like looking for like 1% return on. But like really, you have to have like 5 really great conversations at a live event, and all of a sudden, like those are like customer lifetime value. Like that's what you measure it in.
Yeah.
I told this story earlier for those who heard it, but we did an event with 800 scientists, and there was a gal on the stage. She was producing tons of data on her screen, and she had studied the tigerfish environment for 5 years. So I'm in the back of the room on my radio talking to the tech guys. I go, "Oh, I bet she's fun at a cocktail party." No joke. An hour later, I was down at the reception. Who was the most popular person in the room? Tigerfish lady.
That was Roddy.
So that's what I think about when I think of these event planners getting together. When you say, it's a support group, it's like we're all in the same space where we can relate to each other, support each other, share ideas. So we're all the tigerfish lady, and I like being amongst your people.
Totally. The tigerfish lady is such a great example, right? Because like they're nerding out on something I know nothing about. I've never even heard of a tigerfish. I don't care about a tigerfish. But what I do care about is that tigerfish lady has somewhere to go to stand there and talk about tigerfish.
100%.
That's the important part, and that's the environment that all of us are building, right? Like we're curating an environment for people to do work, do business, collaborate, talk, do whatever. Those are the things that we're doing, and that's where, it goes all the way up. Like those are the hows, but the whys are, why are we doing this? I keep, going back to that, but that's what a CMO is going to ask for. Why are we doing this, and why is this supporting the business or your own business, right? Like, why am I spending all this time redoing my capabilities deck again? It's because I need to change the way that I'm speaking to my customers, right? Because I'm hearing different questions from my customers. You're hearing different questions from your customers. Tweak it, change it. Mine changes every 6 months. I don't do a full revamp because that would be crazy, but I do tweak it and change it based on what is happening right now, right? Like it was all digital first for a long time, and now that digital first has fallen to the third rung, right? Because it's in person now.
Okay, so I've got another one for you guys. As we all strive to put butts in seats again, eyeballs on screens, whatever mode you're using, what is one of the biggest challenges to get your message, your event message, out to attendees? What's one of the biggest challenges in cutting through the noise and getting them to register, pay hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, travel, come see you in person? Like, what is?
I can watch YouTube for free. I can
I
network
know, right?
on LinkedIn. I don't
So,
need your event.
okay, so you're saying the content, but then you also just said you want to be the tigerfish lady and hang out with your peeps.
So yeah, so I mean,
So which is it both?
well, no, it's impressing upon the people that those types of experiences happen only there. But like the objection is, I can get your content somewhere else for free at any time I want to watch it, which they probably won't do. Once they know it's there, they actually don't use it. And then secondly, I can network on LinkedIn for free as well. So again, what do I need your event for? And like having those people and having those devil advocates while you're designing events is super important. Like I can play that position really well.
The dream killer.
No,
I love it.
I've been in events my entire life, like since I was 14 years old, and I love events. It's all my friends are in events. I'm in events. I could still sit down and be like, your event doesn't need to happen. And I could really, and the idea, my goal is to make you prove it, is to push you beyond what you're supposed to be doing and you're just on autopilot to get out of that. So I would say that right now, to get your message across, is that you need to be able to say that there's things that are happening at your event that are beyond those two elements, like that are not just consumption of content or, seeing someone's CV and clicking a button. Like this is telling the stories of the people who had life-changing moments at your experiences, and instead of just saying like, here's the features, here's the benefits, skip that. Like I used to bring like shooters on my events to be able to capture the moments, but I didn't want just the moments of the stage. Like a picture of us three up there isn't selling this show. What sells a show is a high five, is handing a business card to somebody, is patting somebody on the back, is hugging them, I haven't seen them in 2 years. That sells the show. So speak in the language of experiential, like exclusively. Like if it can only be done in live events, that's what you push forward. If it can be done somewhere else, cut it.
That's
I
thinking like a CMO. Let me also just point out that is a strategic thought process. It's not just, we're going to have the annual conference again. Let's just turn and burn.
Yeah, it's really about, for me, yeah, completely agree. I think that going to events now has to be an experience. I think that if we don't have that in your head, it's not going to work because, to your point, like, you can see it on YouTube, so you can learn it there, but what you're going to get in an experience where someone is curating it for you, that is those moments that I'm talking about. Has anyone read Unreasonable Hospitality?
Yes, it's amazing.
Oh my God, it's so
It is
good. I'm
amazing.
totally obsessed with this guy he was the guy who, they split up since, but he had the #1 restaurant in the world in New York City. And it was such an it's an incredible book. And I'll share a little story that just happened with me because I read the book, and the book was all about taking things to the next level. And to do it for you, right? To do it for you, obviously to do it for the business. But, he started at a time when, people were still plugging meters, right, in New York City. Remember this part? It was so great. And so the people would say, hey, Hillary, I'm so glad you're here. What kind of car do you drive? Great. A Yukon. What color is it? Brown. Great. So I'm going to go plug your meter while you're here at dinner. So you don't have to worry about it. That has nothing to do with the food. It has nothing to do with the restaurant. But now Hillary does not need to think about her car running out of time, And so I read this and I was like, God, that is great. So I was doing an event in San Francisco. The CEO's up here. The CMO is asking the CEO a question. She's like, what's your favorite restaurant? And this guy had this crazy story. He grew up in mainland China. He didn't have any running water, and he was like, McDonald's. And I was like, yes, that is the most honest answer from some CEO Silicon Valley guy. That wasn't some bougie 11 Madison Park in New York. It was McDonald's. And I was like, that's brilliant. And then they said, well, what's your favorite music? And he was like, 90s pop. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's driving down the freeway, listening to Britney Spears, eating McDonald's cheeseburgers. And he's making gobs of money. And so in that moment, because I read this book, I called my assistant. I said, run to McDonald's, get me 2 cheeseburgers. And when the CEO came back to give us his microphone, I said, have a good lunch. That was it. It cost me $5, right? But that CEO is going to say to whatever CMO, who was that guy that just got me a burger, right? These are the things that are not sustainable for an entire event. But if we can do them in little bits and pieces, it's where it starts to change that narrative. It starts to change that piece of, this is what happened at this event. I'm going again, because it's an experience. It's something that people want to have and they'll remember. And that's that thing that we're doing, because at these events, no matter what event it is that you're doing, we're doing hospitality.
See, I love translation of event to marketing, right? So in the event world, that's hospitality, capital H, you get it, we all live it. It's probably what most of us really do what we do for. And for the CMO conversion, it's personalization. So you would say to them oh yeah, personalization has a X amount increase in likelihood for conversion or connection or whatever. And it's okay, cool, they get it. I think a lot of it is taking that stuff I think for the most part, event planners know everything that makes it work for people. They just have to prove it, and they have to translate it. So that story of what is a pure awesome hospitality move that you did, if you were to
thanks.
It's smart. I mean, look, stuff like that, it's so less done now than it's ever been done. I don't think hospitality is at its peak currently.
No.
It's at its lowest point in my lifetime. So the bar's super low to make impressions, and it just comes down to paying attention and standing out. So how does your event succeed in a sea of everything that's going on? paying attention, personalizing, like listening to what this, like, for instance, the first event you come back to after the pandemic, whatever that was for people, like in that moment, everyone, what do they need? Like thinking about that, like what do they need is people, catharsis. They need those hallway moments that you mentioned, connection.
Quiet space to
Yeah.
combat the overstimulation that they haven't had for years.
Yeah, and that's a scalable personalization, right? Like you know those people pretty deeply, and like having, if you don't, then well, first off, that's terrible. But like second, bring somebody in who does. But like you can have those moments at not quite as like down the middle target as you hit, but like it generally will work for everybody, and that's hospitality. But you just translate it to personalization, and the CMO says, "Get it done, like make it happen."
Yeah.
I also it's interesting when you're in the C-suite at the table. It depends on the event that you have, right? Some of these events are what I call mandatory fun, right? They're a company event. People are coming. You don't have to push the marketing boulder up the hill that far. They're going to be there, right? If you have an event that nobody knows about and you want to create attendees from the ground zero, then that's a whole different marketing journey than somebody who's trying to deliver to a CMO, ROI on the spend that they had. So just keep that in mind. Like any business, depending on the line of business, the marketing strategies could be different. There was a question? Was there somebody? I thought you said there was a question, huh?
Oh, it was a phone.
Oh, hello. But does that make sense, you guys? I think that
My watch is told me six inches of snow coming tomorrow, so I also got interrupted with
okay.
Minnesota
good to
reminding
know
me that exists.
I think that I'm just surprised how little marketing prowess is out there in our industry when it doesn't matter if the linens are blue or green if nobody shows up. And I will tell you the one thing I know, and I tell all my team after 30 years, the hardest thing to do is to get people to your party. Now, party, AKA tech summit, whatever you're doing. But I just honestly believe that's the hardest thing to do is to have people give you their money, but most importantly, give you their time. Time away from family, time away from their work, that is such a difficult thing to
never been more of a commodity, or never more
100%.
valuable than now. Like a friend of mine is a guy named Dave Adler who created BizBash, and like he is absolutely someone who's been to a billion events. And in the last couple of years of us talking, he's like, I really don't want to leave my condo. Like I don't want to do it. And he's like as much invested in live events as a human being could be, and he's just like, I'm not feeling it after 2 years. Like I'm choosier now. And I'm like, wow, okay, so I have to preach to the converted now, like not even the non-converted, as to why an event matters. And it's because, like, I mean, get somebody to go to a movie theater, right? You're like, I got an 80-inch television and streaming instant. Like,
I'm good here.
yeah, like, have they made it an experience? Not at all. So like they're dying. And like we're looking at that. We're looking at the expediency of lots of different things that you can get access to. And if we don't make it something that is just a must attend, and it's must attend is really just comes down to like telling people that like what their life looks like on the other side. Like you have to really focus on the resolution of the story. You were talking about storytelling. Like the part that's missing frequently is you tell the story of what it's like to be there, but you don't actually tell the story about what it's like your life is like after you've been there. Like, how have you been changed? And having those conversations with people who have been through those experiences and being able to share that and not just hoard that is super valuable. But you're right. I mean, it's not easy right now.
Well, and I think that, it's the hardest thing to do. That's what I know to be true. And if you want 100, you need to invite 10,000, right? And so I always say to the client before they even start the meeting, I say, how many are in your circle of influence? And like, what do you mean? I'm like, how many people you want at this conference? 500. You got 500 friends that will come tomorrow? Oh, you only have 25 in your database? Okay, now we're going to talk about a whole nother marketing strategy. Who owns the database of the cool, smart people that stay up late and listen to music? If you don't have 500, lawyers in your back pocket, somebody else does. What is that marketing partnership going to look like? And it's interesting to me when, we had an event that sold out, and I asked the clients, like, tell me more about this event, that exploratory. And they're like, oh, well, you can get credits for erosion control. I'm like, I don't see any of these people at this event. And I'm like, what? This is important. Who else gives you your credits for that?
So many industries
and they were like,
that are
oh, we got on some DOT listserv, 10, 15,000 erosion control professionals. They blasted that thing out like 3 times. It was sold out in a week. They'd never had more than 100 people. So it's like they just didn't really think about casting that wide net of, again, there's that mentality. Well, we've done the annual conference every year. We get 500 of our members. I did a marketing conference and I said to them, you have 500 members, you get 250 on a regular. That's pretty good. 50%, you're doing solid. How many professional marketers are there in the Seattle region? Do you know that number? And they were just like, what do you mean? I go, so you just invite your 500 members over and over and over. All your messaging is to the membership. Come to the event, come to the event. Not one, sling of a wider net to go out to all the marketing professionals and a message that says, you may not know who we are, but put on this badass marketing event. And it's interesting to me how the thought process is sometimes such a challenge. And I think as event professionals, yes, we're going to decide green or blue linens, but you have to be thinking like a marketing professional to think about who is your audience, how you're going to get them there, how many do you need to invite to hit your number that you want to make the money you want. Like, it's a very strategic thinking exercise. It's not just let's get into the Excel sheet and start crossing stuff off. Marcus, what are your thoughts
makes me
about
tired.
what's the biggest challenge of getting people?
I'm already, I don't want to do that.
That stressed
I got
me
a lot
out.
of things to think about over here.
Yeah,
I'm very,
totally.
but like, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges to get people butts and seats?
I think everything that you're saying, which is the parts, and I think also for me, just listening to you, like, what are some of the things I can glean from you that I can take back and try, right? Because I think that that's the other thing is we're not going to get anywhere if we don't give it a shot. And one of the interesting things that I was thinking about while I was up here is getting people to come to, my event, your event, whatever. It's what is that thing that you want to have at your event? And sometimes it's really hard to put into words. Like I think that we're surrounded, and take the things that you love, right? Like, what is it about these things that you love that you want to incorporate into your event? And I was thinking up here, there's this crazy little store on First Avenue called Bobby Medlin. I'd never been there, and it is a store full of stuff that no one needs, that I want every single thing in there. It's like she literally is selling a thermometer from 1900s France that's broken. And I was like, I mean, maybe I'd buy that. Like that sounds pretty
Not sure
good.
I set out today to find me a broken
I was
thermometer.
not planning to buy a broken thermometer today. I didn't get it, but I did get a ceramic bird that's like this big. It's ridiculous that I don't need. But the point is that like if I were to really distill down what it is I loved about that. Now, it might not be applicable to all of the, your events, but think about that something that I know is special. I know that it's curated. I know that I'm going to find something that is going to entice my curiosity and make me ask questions. What is that? Why is that doing that? I'm naturally a curious person. So like as we start doing these, and we're building these events, and because I think that was the initial question, like how do we get people to come? I think that it's answering those questions. Like I can't tell you how Bobby Medlin got me into her space, but she did. And now I'm like obsessed. I'm totally obsessed. But it's those kinds of things that we can create when we go to events or we do events, especially for things that we've done over and over and over again. You know what works, but how do you tweak it? How do you tell that next story? What is the next story, and what is that next piece? For me in my company right now, it's this stinking book that I've read. I'm obsessed with it. And I pull it up every single time I'm on a call with sales where I'm like, have you read this book? Let me tell you about this book. And let me tell you why I believe what he's saying in this book is going to change the way that we do events. Because coming out of the pandemic, it's not build it and they will come, right? Because for a long time, just like all of tech, it was grow big, grow fast. That's exactly what events were doing. It is not that landscape any longer. It's very, very different. And it's about curating those experiences for who is in the room and making sure that who the right people are in the room. And that's where it goes to like thinking like a CMO. But the thing is that unless you're your own CMO, you have a CMO that's getting paid to be a CMO and have that person teach you what it is that you need to know. Right? Like so many people want to pretend like, oh, I know everything. It's like, ugh, God, that is so reductive and boring. Like ask the person that's being paid a lot of money why you're doing this. And that's the really important part too, is like to get out of yourself, ask those questions, because that's just going to help all of us do our jobs better.
Well, and I think selling the sizzle is so important. I have this client that has sent the same email every week with the same subject line every week. And they're just, the more I pound them over the head with this, that people will come to this. I'm like, we have so many interesting things happening. And yeah, we
I,
need to change. And again, I'm not a professional marketer, but I find myself sitting in that marketing hat going, what?
I
If I
think
was an
after 30
attendee,
years you are.
yeah,
Yeah.
eventually you have to just embrace it. I would say the biggest chasm between how a CMO thinks and how an event planner thinks, and also might be the answer to how to put more butts in seats or what have you, however we're going with, is risk aversion. CMOs are not risk averse. Event planners are the most risk averse. CMOs don't even last that long in organizations. I mean, if you really drill down to it, like the CEOs generally have about 10% of CEOs believe that CMOs are maximizing their effectiveness, where they believe 80% of their CFOs are. The CEOs don't necessarily even believe completely in the CMO. The ones that do great, but they're risk takers. Like they win and they lose. Event planners don't win and they lose. They're in the middle. They don't really win big. They don't really lose too bad, right? Like the drape line. Oh, there's no big swings. So if you want to talk about putting butts in seats, and you want to talk about to CMO who is a risk taker, who is empowered to make those types of things, you say 30% of the show I want to take some risks, and not risks with safety, not risks with that kind of stuff. I'm talking about design risks, like something that isn't a guarantee because it hasn't been done a million times. The reason you do things a million times over and over again is because there's very little risk. But you're never gonna be like this wow moment where like a TED talk. So like, what if we just strip everything down to this and we just keep it to this? And you're like, well, that's not how we do things. But they made a decision, they went with it, and it became a thing. Like those types of like moves where you're like putting a line in the sand that like this is going to be pure. This is going to be all this way. We're going to tell every presenter that there's there's four segments of every presentation, and it's going to be about the now, the future, the present, whatever. And like everyone has to conform to that. So if there's a uniformity and there's we can cut this and make more money off of it or whatever. Those types of like things, it's usually just like do your presentation, wherever it is, it's really fine. Like the conciseness of really, really being focused on that, and then saying like this could not necessarily be a slam dunk, but if it does, it will. If it actually works, it'll work big. We don't think like that generally in events, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and you're totally bringing up such a good point, is that that's also a differentiator, right? So that's also what is different about your event, right? Because there's a lot of static out there. There is a lot of white noise. There is a million people doing the same event in multiple different ways. So you have to differentiate yourself from the noise. And how do you do that? It's by telling that piece, like, this is what we're doing that's different. And sometimes it'll work.
Yeah, sometimes
And
not
sometimes
always.
it won't
Like
work.
I just thought of like, I was like, what's an event I could do that for? Okay, I just made up an idea. This could not work. It's called Creatives by Design, and it's a summit of architects and experience designers, and they come together at a show and they talk about creativity and design and art and architecting design. I don't know what I'm even saying here. Could that work? I don't know. Maybe is that like a part of it? Is that going to be something you can find on LinkedIn? Can you see YouTube for that? No. Does it pass those? Like have those things. Does it pass that? Has there ever been anything like it? Probably not. I just made it up. Stuff like that.
well, I'm copywriting it as we speak.
I don't even. It's probably a bad name. Whatever my first name is, always a bad one. But like that kind of stuff where you're like, all right, no one's ever made an event planner / architect show. I just riffed off you saying architect.
Yeah.
So what did one learn how to make money off of their intellectual ideas? Is one never been able to do that really well? Yes. Is there some synergy? Like what if you put together different ingredients to make something new as opposed to like keep making the same meal?
I think every time and this goes back to live events, every time I come to an event, I learn a nugget that just sticks with me. And you are so spot on. I think event professionals are not risk takers.
can't
They
be
want to
usually.
rinse and repeat. If you hear that once, you'll hear it a million times. Let's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Nobody's willing to just blow it out and like we're going to build a new wing and it's going to be completely different. Like I think of like startup weekend where people come together and build a business. I think if we did that in the event space, or we could literally just crowdsource some big old creative.
Hackathons, like
Yeah,
lots of.
we could learn from those other industries. All right, we got about 10, 15 minutes left. I want to jump into some questions. Oren.
I have a question for how do you show up like a CMO if you sit more maybe in the vendor service provider? Because you talked a lot about planners, but like so to simplify it, the person that provides the tablecloth versus the person that's having the full strategy. Do you see any difference? Do you have any strategies or thoughts about how vendors of services that support the event can show up like a CMO?
I think you asked the same question.
I agree.
Right? You asked that question. Why are you doing this? You can ask that as the vendor, and it's going to totally set you apart from anybody else, right? Like so many people might ask the question like, and they might think like, oh, I'm just going to tell them how I'm going to build the stage and how I'm going to have the LED screen and how I'm going to do all this stuff. But the how is totally useless until you go to the why first, right? So from my perspective, I love when vendors dig in and ask questions. You have to ask the questions because you have to understand what it is that they're doing on the stage, because you might be like, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that because you said that you want to do this. You said that you want to wow people. You say, I'm making this up, but like for an SKO, right? Like the why behind an SKO, there's so many normal whys, right? Like we want people to drink the Kool-Aid. We want people to be proud that they work at this company. We want people to feel a part of something. How are you going to do that when you walk into that keynote room and blow their effing socks off, right? Like that screen is gorgeous. Use it. That sound system is amazing. Use it, right? So like, but use it in the way that supports the message, right? So the why, right? How does this support the why? And I think that that is how vendors that are in here, I'm a vendor too, I have to ask that question, right? But as we get smarter and as we're coming out of the pandemic, we have to ask those questions because it's not wash, rinse, and repeat in any way, shape, or form.
If I was putting on an SKO and I was a linen vendor, I could answer that. So I'd say, okay, what are your goals of your event? And they would say something likely to the degree of, well, we want everyone to have buy-in and we want them to feel like this is their company. It's like, okay, so your linen colors should be voted on by your team, and different teams should have different linen colors, and they should be in different sections based on that. So like that's buy-in. They actually get to say like, we picked it out. You can bring it up again, but like your answer isn't just like, what are your brand colors? Okay, we'll do that. Like that's every single competitor is saying exactly that. So you're like, okay, what's like, I don't want to care like what your tactical goals are. I want your strategic goals. Like strategically, why are you producing this event? And the answer likely would be like some kind of unity or whatever. Then giving them some kind of competitive thing of like the linen colors to show like one room of this is this section or that section, but like getting into that, that's on linen color. Like you can do this with everything. Like in AV, it's like way more obvious content, sound, or whatever else. Like F&B, I think same deal. Like you can have, some kind of weigh in on that. But like if the goal is that, like ask them like whatever they say, like what linen do you want? Like why are you doing that? Then okay, but why are you doing that? Like go like one level higher. And then you'll start to connect with them and they'll be like, oh, this stuff actually does matter. Like it became an arbitrary thing that is a commodity. You raise yourself above commodity and now you're a strategic partner.
And I think, have you ever seen the movie Inception? Drop that little bomb. I mean, I do think if you were to say in a planning meeting with them, should be at your event that's never been here before? Just yes, you're a vendor, but who's never been here, and why do you think they don't? Or have you lost some of the people who come and why aren't they coming anymore? Or you can ask prompting marketing questions that get them to think more like a CMO, because if you know some of this stuff, and I think it's, okay, I would be thrilled, Oren, if I sent you a deck and you came back and you're like, this doesn't meet your strategic goals that you sent me at the beginning. Seems a little flat. Seems like we haven't really addressed the whatever. That's a dream partner. I would agree. I'm looking for partners who are going to collaborate, push back. Yeah, make me look like a rock star. And this is what you do, but you also understand that we're trying to think like CMOs. So put your CMO hat on and come to the table from your perspective, and then we can collaborate that way.
And just get curious. I think that's the other
Yeah.
thing too, is just being curious is going to create that trust, right? Like, man, these people are really interested in actually what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Thought-provoking
That
questions.
really is just like, yeah, it's just thought-provoking questions too.
Other questions? Speaking of thought-provoking questions, yes. I say yes. I mean, you're trying to get people. The call to action is get people to come to the conference. That's not the same as make sure
It's so
people
much
know about
higher.
State Farm Insurance. Like it's
You're asking so much more.
Yeah.
It's a really big ask.
a
Like,
high bar.
get me to click on something, pretty easy. You can trick me to do it. I can accidentally bump something, whatever. Like, it's like 2 seconds of time. Like, you think how much money and thought is put into that stuff, right? Getting somebody to like get in I got in a plane. I like my wife is like, telling me like, ugh, I need more help at home right now, and I'm here. Like, it's pressure. Like, it's a lot. You give a lot to be at a live event. It's real, right? So like that kind of barrier. So yeah, I think the barrier is really high. You're asking a lot. So like the marketing has to really deliver on not the ticket price. Who cares about the ticket price? Like, what's the actual opportunity cost that you have to overcome? Like, what's all that? So you have to know all that first, and then you have to be able to hit them over the head with how much real value you get. Like, my real value is not that I got 6 sessions and I got to meet like 4 leads. My real value is I had like 2 life-changing moments, or I had this idea that I heard something that turned into a new line of business because I was able to like ask follow-up questions of that thought leader like right in front of me, and I was able to do that kind of stuff, and I able to like get me in a mindset where I had 100% attention. So like you have to really first know all your barriers. There's a lot, and then all the value. There's also a lot. So all of that said, like anything else that marketing has to do probably is more, just basic. Like it's a big responsibility.
It is a big one. And I think too, like just having a ticketing strategy, right? So I think the trick too would be getting buy-in across the company as to who's responsible for what, right? Because marketing can tell the story, and then I don't know where you work, but I mean, like you could have sales is in charge of selling the tickets, right? Because they know who their customers are, who the prospects are, right? So, and tying those things to their incentive trip, right? So like there's
Yes.
a lot that you could like in terms of ticketing strategy, where you're going to go out, how you're going to go out, when you're going to go out, what content is going to be in those emails, like you were saying before. It's not the same, right? Like every time we pushed out something that had new interesting content is when we saw rises in registration. It was not the early bird
Yeah,
special
that's-
for getting
no one
stuff.
sees that.
It
Someone
was-
needs to shoot the bird.
no,
Shoot the
someone
early
needs to
bird.
shoot the goddamn.
Oh, there was
bird.
an
Yeah.
extension?
break it to you.
Wow.
But I
How
think-
lucky am I?
Extinct.
You're
The
like,
Yeah.
early bird is extinct.
But I
get
think
it.
getting buy-in across, the different silos within your organization could help do that, because then you're not the only one harping on it, right? Because then you're not the only one responsible for that portion. Like that's like you said, it's a big ask.
It's a big
right?
ask,
But if you can get alignment across your team or other teams, then it gets really interesting, because then it puts the onus on all of you as a team, which actually gets you to go like this, right? So it gets full buy-in across the thing, where it's not just you harping and asking,
He said sales. That made me think of something. Steal this idea. Everyone who has remote team members, which is like almost everyone now, is absolutely starving to have their team come together. And here you are selling tickets where you're bringing people to come together. Sell a team ticket where there is the facilitated or not facilitated event that takes place before or after the show, and there's different strategies either way, where those teams can come together for their annual retreat or whatever at your show and around your show, and then just sell them the tickets, as a group thing. I mean, a group's easier to sell than a single ticket, but that's a sales thing where you can empower them. And like, I have this idea. The current state right now is that people are starving to come together as groups. We have this opportunity where we're bringing everybody there. That we have a hotel, we can make some small rooms, etc. But like, that's really easy to sell. And then you're doing it 10 at a time or 20 at a time. Like, just tack that on. But like, it takes you to, like, a salesperson should be like, how do I sell something right now? Like, and that's where bringing everybody together is super important.
Well, and I think one of the things when we talk about elevating yourself as an event professional inside an organization is having enough of this marketing acumen to ask these probing questions, or to come to a meeting and say, oh, hey, marketing team, did you know when we tried that change in subject line, did you know we had an uptick of 20%? So to have that conversation with them makes them think of you as a professional marketer versus just the person on point to execute. Does that make sense? So it's like, that's the whole purpose of this track, is to have enough acumen to be able to go to the table and say, great job, marketing team. I'm also a marketer. I'm marketing this event. I know who my audience is. I've curated really interesting experiences. We need to tell the story the right way. It's not marketing across the rest of the company. It's not the same. I have my own goals, my own audience, my own story. I need to use my own channels. So I hope that helps. Other questions? I know we're getting close to time, but you guys are into it, plugged in. I love it. Yes, let's shoot the early bird. Oh, I have to say, actually, I did, Nick, what you're talking about. We did group sales. We had a movement-based, it's called the Better Man Conference, and it was all about men as allies in big corporations. And we sold group tickets to the individual companies, and we let them all go to a lunch by themselves, because there was a lot of heavy stuff all morning about what their culture is around allyship. And then they got into their lunches, and they were like, yeah, but that speaker doesn't know that we have John. Like, they really dug into like what was just said about what we should all do and what's really happening over here at this company is not the same. And then what we did is we added a facilitator to every lunch so that the group had
Even more
a bird's eye. It was
value.
I'm
Like, if I'm an organization of like, people or whatever, and someone's selling me the opportunity for me to learn something and then expedite the learning into action, I'm all on. I'm on board.
Totally.
Like, that's it. Like, we create events to create change. Like that, events are change agents. And anything that facilitates the change, faster or like more thoroughly is on. That's a really good strategy.
I got some ideas.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm learning as much as everyone else, if not more.
Well, I really, really want to thank Marcus and Nick, two amazing rock stars. If you're not following them, you should, on LinkedIn and all that. Great perspectives, great resources, lots of information coming down their content around events. And I just appreciate all of you being here and challenging yourself to think more like a chief marketing officer in your next project, your next event, your next company that's called an event. And have a great show. Enjoy. We'll stick around a little bit if you have any questions. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you,
you for
audience.
coming.
Have a great day.